Hello everyone, I am Elizabeth and I welcome you to the second episode of OmniArtisan's video podcast. In this episode, I will talk about today's economy and consumption. A very important topic to be covered in depth, but I will talk briefly about. So, let's begin with a simple exercise. Can you visualize yourself when shopping? Let's say you are from Funchal, Madeira's capital city, and you go to a supermarket to do your groceries. Can you manage to put in your shopping cart only products produced, created, assembled in Portugal, for example? Can you? Well, without knowing your habits or what you might want to buy, if you are going into a supermarket or even a small grocery shop in the corner, I bet you can't fill it only with Portuguese products, because plenty of the ones disposed on the shelves come from outside. Let's see, how did we get where we are now? Globalization. First, we had big improvements in our communication technologies. They have progressed so fast that we are now able to send an email with our smartphones in a matter of seconds. While in the past, the main medium was by post, for example, receiving and sending letters. Nevertheless, we still get post nowadays, mostly bills to pay. Oh, but of course, not everyone has smartphones, but with laptops, computers, it is still a huge improvement in communication. Over the time, we got as well a huge improvement in our transportation. We stopped being limited by the help of animals such as horses and donkeys to be able to take a high-speed train nowadays. Not in the case of Madeira Island, of course. And now we have planes and ships going all around the world. By the last decades, we had as well, with all this development, many multinational companies being created, such as Ford, Microsoft, Amazon. And now comes the big question. How do these changes affect our lives? In terms of employment, it seems that this progress is awesome because, for example, it brought more job opportunities for people in developing countries. With the increase of outsourced jobs such as customer service, data entry, web design, accounting, creation of factories. But is it really positive? I ask this because what can seem positive on our eyes doesn't mean it is at all positive. We have to analyze the whole picture. Follow my observation. If there are jobs being outsourced to developing countries, does it mean that on the developed countries everyone got a job and these companies can't find available people and so, as an alternative, have to turn to developing countries in search for human resources? Or is it that these companies, or at least most majority of them, are always looking for the lowest paid collaborators to save money? Did you follow? Now, I will give you another view. Let's talk about Portugal, a country considered developed. We had and still have many industries in our country. Industries such as textiles, paper, chemicals, footwear. There are ups and downs, and at every crisis there are companies shutting down. For you to have an idea, I found many news informing the number of companies closing down. In 2018, for example, only during the first 10 months, there were more than 22,000 companies closing in my country. It happens over and over. I found an older news from 2007 stating that on the previous 5 years, more than 65 companies closed down. Now, let's analyze this closely. If they end not being able to dispose of their products in case of silly mass production, or don't find interested customers in case of by order, some will lead to bankruptcy, but they will close their doors and send all of their employees home. But not every single company is closing due to bankruptcy. Many do close because of emerging markets, emerging places in developing countries in which they can go and build their factories in there and have lower paid workers and more tax benefits. In short, I personally don't see it as positive when there is such an easiness for companies to come, set up their factories, get benefits for investing in here, and as soon as they get a new opportunity to save money, they don't even consider their employees and the community in which they have been settled. They just pack their luggage, their stuff, and leave. Have a thought about this. Now, in terms of good supply chain, in particular food, we no longer depend on local seasons or resources. And many people consider that this is awesome, that this brought more diversity into our diets, we have more variety of food available throughout the year, and it gives people freedom of choice. For example, bananas from the tropics are exported to temperate countries where they don't grow. Well, a minority of people, as me, and that fortunately is increasing in number, don't find this great. Mostly when, as an example, for me to have a piece of fruit out of season, such as an apple, this had to be produced massively with the use of pesticides, coming from the other side of the world, having a huge footprint, plus even having to be frozen. Ugh. Well, I prefer to go without it, and perhaps eat an avocado instead, that thankfully grows locally in our island. So, is it worth? Is it worth to have this globalization and such an unregulated long chain of supplies with such a huge demand of fossil fuels? This was a very short example, but further in a future episode I will cover about life cycle assessment, a way in which we can assess the whole environmental impact of eating certain foods in opposite to others with quantitative data. I already covered a bit about companies when analyzing the employment issue, but now talking in particular about the expansion of companies to other cities and countries, when it happens to be a company from our country that expands, gets to other markets, we tend to see it with good eyes. But when there are big companies or even medium-sized companies coming to our communities and they kind of swallow our local market, well, some people still see it as good. Mostly people that have so low income that when these companies come and offer lower prices on their products and services, it looks amazing for them. They sense they can save money. However, the problem with this short-term thinking is that this will get worse and worse as a loop as the multinational companies keep on setting their premises and hurt local business operations with unfair competition, because many of these get subsidies from governments or don't have all externalities accounted in the final price, making products making local products look expensive in comparison. Normally, only the people directly harmed are the ones complaining: local businesses, farmers, artisans, etc. And also few other people like me that are visionaries and that can look at this with a long-term perspective, foreseeing all the negative future impacts. For example, I live in an island that have about 80 to 90% of its food imported. We have big supermarkets that over the time led us to be very dependent from outside chain supplies. There wasn't a strategic work done in guaranteeing that our local produce and market will thrive, and that then only for what we can supply with local circuits we would get from outside. So, if a problem arose that would not allow us to receive food in the region, what will happen? This is a question I make myself all times, and one of my biggest drives to work in this project, OmniArtisan, is to help recreate local circuits, mostly food circuits, and assure that we have food security. Because as I do myself this question over and over, I know that in short term, many people would starve in here. We have an ongoing stock of perishable food of just 4 weeks. If there would happen a collapse, either energetic, financial, or social, as soon as people got to know that in the following days, weeks, wouldn't enter food in the island, we would witness chaos on all stores we have in here, with frantic people stocking all they can. Then we would see people get into the farms and dig for food without even asking permission. Can you imagine the chaos? I see globalization as a coin of two faces. There are benefits, such as we being able to learn different customs, traditions, languages, but as well drawbacks. And these drawbacks, in my perspective, are higher than the benefits. Many of you will disagree with me, but mostly because you listen to me and you never thought about this in depth. So before you have a negative reaction towards my point of view, do some research on all negativity brought by globalization. Don't look only at the good things. Check all the real costs to nature for you to be able to claim that it is good. Because yes, we have got so many more comfort in certain ways than in the past. But I can't consider that we progressed when in parts of the world, mostly on developing countries, people do suffer for few to have comfort. What's the point? What's the point of few people in the world having comfort and even fewer having luxury lives when most of the world is starving? And look, I'm not a hypocrite in which I make these analysis, but I am also buying or making use of globalized services and products. I do yet because I am tied to this society modus operandi. I don't live in a cave away from everyone. I wish I could. But instead, I am working hard within this society to be the least dependent on globalized trade goods, the least dependent on sweat factories, the least dependent on suffering overall. I want to have an eco lifestyle, sourcing the most I can locally. And if there are goods that we can't have locally done, we check for the nearest supplier, checking first on the mainland, then in Spain, get networks of like-minded communities on board, and so on. Summing up, we have always to look at the whole picture. As I already said, when we think and talk about our current economy and consumption, we have to take into account that this model of linear economy, take, make, consume, throw away, in which we live will not sustain our lives for long before a huge economic collapse, another huge crisis. We are encouraged to keep consuming, to keep this monster alive and aiming for continuous economic growth. That's insane. And we tend consuming stuff that brings no benefit for our lives and damages Mother Earth. We have to turn more and more into local and circular economies, into trading only what we need for a balanced life and not stuff to fill our egos. If you have come up with this realization yourself and you wish to bring change in your local community, recreate local circuits, either if it is in Madeira or other community in the world, allowing more people to have revenue as the money circulates internally in an infinite loop, come and join me at my platform at community.omniartisan.com and let's work together on this. Thank you very much for listening.